If you don't think comic book characters actually respect themselves, leave it to Robert Kirkman to disprove that notion. He has no integrity for his own creation and seemingly is insulting himself as he was questioned about the backlash to the race swapping in Amazon's animated adaptation of Invincible. He said, "We have to recognize that a couple of dumb white guys made this comic book in the early 2000s." So if you haven't seen the Invincible animated show, they race swapped Amber Bennett, the main or the first love interest of the series' protagonist. You can see here in the comic, she is a white woman with blonde hair and blue eyes. In the animated show, she is a black woman with dark brown hair, almost black, and looks like brown eyes. Not only that, they changed Mark Grayson and his mom into becoming Koreans. I guess in the comic, they were both white, and half Viltrumite in Mark's case. But TV Guide asked, Cat Moon asked, how much this concept of representation was, quote, on your mind when you were working on season 2. Kirkman, who wrote the comic book series and is producing the animated show, said, "That's something that's been really important to us. We have to recognize that a couple of dumb white guys made this comic book in the early 2000s, and there was a real lack of diversity in that series. And also with the Invincible character himself, we talked to fans at all the conventions and places we would go, and because his ethnicity was ambiguous in the comics, everyone identified with him. We would have Filipino fans come up and say, 'I'm so excited that you made Mark Filipino.' We would have Mexican fans come up and say, 'We're so excited that you made Mark Mexican.' And it was just amazing to see how important representation is on a personal level when you're face to face with a person." They always say this, but I don't think I've actually heard. I mean, I've seen some people say this, but it's usually people who are already steeped in identity politics saying this, and they're trying to reinforce the agenda that is being pushed by BlackRock and all of these studios that have been captured by BlackRock and everything like that. I don't think I've actually really seen anyone quite say that. Like, oh, this person's race, this character's race meant so much to me because I'm this character's race as well, in like a genuine sort of way. I've only really heard it from people that are trying to push this as an activist messaging. And again, the whole representation narrative is turned on its head when you realize that, oh, representation is so important, and that's why we need to race change characters. But when you realize that they're race changing characters, what does that say about the character's race that's being changed? Then it's clearly not that important to represent the race that's being changed, right? So the representation narrative is absolutely vile, but they always are trying to put it out there, and it's always being like, you can even see it here. He's like, dumb white guys. There was a real lack of diversity, meaning I guess that was too white is basically what he's saying, which is just ridiculous, saying that there's something wrong with being white or having your characters being white or looking white. He's saying that there was a problem with that in the 2000s, and there's not. There's not a problem. There wasn't a problem with it in the 2000s. There's not a problem with having your characters being white now in 2023. But nevertheless, Kirkman goes on and says, because I grew up at a time where I went to see Rambo and Die Hard and Terminator and every movie that came out when I was a child, and I watched a bunch of tough white guys do cool stuff, and I was like, this is a lot of fun. And you end up being in this bubble where you have no awareness of what it's like to live in a world where you're not seeing yourself reflected and all of these other things. I guess, interestingly, he leaves out Lethal Weapon. He leaves out Predator. He leaves out Blade. I mean, there's so many examples that he's just like, oh, those movies clearly didn't exist. Those TV shows didn't exist. So those people weren't getting represented or whatever, is what he's trying to say here. So you can like lampoon the representation narrative from that angle as well. And it just shows you how utterly ridiculous, bankrupt the argumentation is. And it's clearly only based on identity politics, the skin color of your skin or your sexual identity or all this other stuff, which is just a bunch of bogus. So he concluded saying, so to be able to, in any small part, work against that is a tremendous honor. So he's literally saying he wants to have less white people in his comics and animated shows. I think that's what he's saying there. And that's just absolutely disgusting behavior that is indeed racist. There's no other way around that. And that's exactly what Seth Rogen said to Entertainment Weekly. He wanted to work with less white people. And now you have Robert Kirkman saying to work against having white characters or white actors in shows is a tremendous honor. I mean, what kind of person says that? Like, it's just heinous, absolutely heinous that someone would say this. And that's why I don't watch this stuff, because these people hate you, and you shouldn't watch, or at least in my case, I'm not going to watch something or read something when these people are actively making it very clear that they do indeed hate you. I'd rather support someone that doesn't hate me, and is also writing quality stuff, just maybe not getting the massive signal boost that Robert Kirkman is getting from studios like Prime Video and Amazon Studios.
Subscribe for more.